Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's roadmap stream. I am joined tonight by Matt Pedersen, our exec. That side, Matt Pedersen, our exec producer. Hello, Matt.
Hello, how's it going?
Yeah, very well, thank you, Matt. And we have a special guest tonight. It is Jasper from Rivet Games. Thanks very much, Jasper. We love having you on the stream. Thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great.
Brilliant, and as you can see, we've set everything up so that we've got three people on the stream as well. We'll have some more magic coming up with when we switch to two people on the stream as well. So we are
Steady
we
on,
are testing ourselves with our
steady
production
on.
tonight, folks. So yeah, we are talking about the Train Sim World 2 roadmap tonight. We released the article earlier on today, which contains information about all of the current things that we are working on, a little bit of a status update on all of them. This month we have been talking about, and this is why we've got Jasper on the stream. We have the new Island Line add-on, which is coming to Train Sim World 2 on the 19th of July. I'm just getting my months right here, and you can pre-order it now if you like. Spirit of Steam Summer Sale is now also live as well. So if there's anything on your wish list, take a look. There might be something on there that actually is on a pretty good deal. So yeah, that's on until tomorrow, I believe. So if you've been waiting to get involved, then today's your last chance, or at least part of tomorrow's your last chance. So the article covered, as well as the Island Line announcement, which we did tease a little bit earlier on in the day, and there's a big nice walk around video as well of the 484 that you can see, which Jasper put together, so thank you very much for that, Jasper. We touched on everything from a development deep dive on how we create gameplay within Train Sim World 2. That's really worth a read from Michael, and he'll be joining us on a stream later in the month as well to go over some of the things that he talked about in that article. Really cool. We know you like getting a little bit of an under the hood look at how we do what we do, so that's a really good one for us to kind of put a pin in later on in the month. We've also got an introduction to Alex, our new community manager. Some of you might have seen him last Thursday, but we'll also be bringing him onto streams more regularly in the future. If you want to get a little bit more information about him, then there's a little short interview on there as well as the roadmap and a few other bits and pieces of updates that we'll talk a little bit more about during the course of this live stream. So let's go to the Island Line BR 2022 BR Class 484, as the full add-on is known. Jasper, it's been lovely to be able to get this out into the open, because I know that this was a bit of this one is a little bit of a complex one to try and get your head around if with the way that we were describing it as a loco, and even now I think perhaps there are a few people who perhaps don't quite get the whole way that this is going to work. So in kind of a very as concise as you can, as concisely as you can you tell everybody at home how the Island Line 2022 is going to work, what has gone into it, and what players can expect?
I'll try my very best. So the Island Line 2022 is basically a Loco add-on, but it has its own route attached to its back. So we have the brand new Class 484, which you just mentioned, as the new train, and because the train is so different from the other trains that run previously on the Isle of Wight, they needed to make a few changes to the actual Island Line railway. So what they did is they raised platforms, lowered tracks, and added the passing loop at Braiding back in. So it's these three major things that we needed to do, and that's why it has its own route. Um, on the other hand, it's not just these changes. We've actually built the Island Line or the Isle of Wight from ground up again. So it's way denser in details. You have way higher assets. You have more areas the player can walk into. You have actually the signal box and braiding, for example, the player can go into, and it's like a museum nowadays in real life, and you can see the actual switches and that kind of stuff. That's pretty cool, I think, watching the trains go by. Um, then we have new signals. Yeah, yeah, that's basically it. Trying to keep it in a dense way.
Don't worry, I've got more questions which are going to go into a little bit more of detail. But should we show some screenshots first of all? Because we've got some screenshots that were used in the article. Let's go and cycle through some of those, and you can tell us a little bit more about the project, and again, hopefully visually will allow players to have a little bit more context as to what we're talking about. So, without further ado, let's go into the slideshow.
Cool.
Ooh. Ah.
We
So yeah,
yeah,
tell us a little bit about these, Jasper.
yeah. So first one is the 484 in random stations, and as you can see, you have these updated textures on the stations where they have been raised. Um, Two new trains running on there, and you can actually see in this one the upgraded equipment for with the gate and fences and the disabled ramp access. It's like details like that we've added. Um, can see that close up here pretty well. It's like the new texture on top of the platform. We also have the PIS system working. Um, yeah, another shot of the train, and spent quite a bit amount of detail on the actual train itself, on the undercarriage, for example. We have like these copper wires and um, yeah, cables and pipes going on around the bogies. So that's quite cool to see. So it's definitely worth having a look down there. Um,
Uh,
yeah.
and one of the things you can notice, particularly on that picture, is the raised platforms. Now, one
Oh
of
yeah,
the,
sure.
we'll come on to the livery in a second. But in terms of the actual changes that have been made to make this work, I guess one of the big things is changing the platform height so that it fits with the 484. But my understanding, Jesper, is that that means that the route has basically been rebuilt from the ground up. Is that am I right in thinking that?
in in the engine or in the game, yeah, it has been not just built up from the ground. We actually started from scratch. So everything you see is new, like track signals. Everything has been relayed, redone from scratch. Um, yeah, some of the stations are still the old buildings, true, but we try to update the textures and add a few more details to them. So you'll definitely see a difference in just looking at the stations, and the overall quality of the route and how far it spreads out to left and right has changed quite significantly. So you get a much more immersive feeling when driving down the route and looking to the left and the right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and actually, quite a nice detail you could see in the previous screenshot are the hovercrafts we finally have sitting there at right as Planet.
Yes, and on a couple of the images as well, you can see the water texture as well, which, as far as I understand it, is the water texture that is used within West Cornwall Local.
Yeah, that's the upgraded one where it actually interferes with the ground and has this like nice foam line at the top. Um, yeah, and I know we'll get to this later on, but that's also in an update for the old Isle of Wight.
Absolutely, we'll come on to that in a second. Let's talk about the livery, because a few people have already noticed that this is a fictitious livery that we've put together, but using the Island Line name. There's a little bit of a backstory and a little bit of complexity that's involved with this. So Jasper, I'll let you do the honours with this because you described it to me earlier. But can you tell us a little bit about what has happened with this and why we're currently in the position that this is in, where we've got the right name but a fictitious livery?
Yeah, sure. So we started working on this train when we didn't have the livery or the license for the original livery, and that happened before. And usually, just at the moment you show a brand the actual train in like another livery or without a livery at all, they say, okay, well, yeah, take it, and yeah, you're good to go with it. It didn't happen on this train, and that's probably because the livery or the licensing is a bit more complicated because, like you said, it has the Island Line name on it, which is owned by the Department of Transport for Transport. So they said, yes, you can use this. We have their approval. Um, but it has a fictitious livery, although we tried to keep the style of the original train in terms of colors and overall paint scheme. But that's because the actual livery and the logo belong to South Western Railway, so we don't have their approval. We're hoping to get it at some point, but that's nothing we can promise tonight, or we can say something definitive about.
Yeah, we are in active discussions with SWR as I say, if there is progress on us being able to implement the kind of the real to life livery, of course we will look to do that. But at the moment we can't really promise anything until anything's signed or anything like that. As soon as we know, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's take us back to the roadmap screen. Oh, and there I'm back. Let's talk a little bit about the because we will have a preview for this, and I think we are happy to say that we'll do the preview this time next week, so next Tuesday, and that will give you an opportunity to kind of see it all and all of the changes that have been made to the route and the improvements that have been made. But also coming with this is a series of improvements to the original Isle of Wight route as well, which again I think was a really good thing to do. I think we've done something similar with Arosa in the past, where coming back to the route, you've been able to implement some positive changes to the content. Same here with Isle of Wight. So do you have a kind of a top level list of the things that are going to be improved? Because we'll obviously detail all of these within the patch notes, but perhaps give a taster of what is going to be coming back to the original route.
Yeah, so the two most noticeable ones are probably the updated water from West Cornwall Local with the foam line and the more seamless water texture. And then we have the added display boards and a couple of fixed audio occlusions on the train. So there were some issues with standing up and sitting down. You could hear the volume that you only should hear if you're outside the train. So it's kind of a bit mixed up things. So these have been fixed. And then other various bits and pieces on collision textures and overall terrain issues. Nothing huge in these terms, just general bits and pieces over the entire route, which then sum up to a smoother experience if you want to have it that way.
Should it fill out the route a little bit? Should it make it feel a little bit more kind of alive? Because I know that there was a little bit of comment around sort of scenery and making things feel like there's a lot more kind of within the vicinity of the route itself.
No, not to the level that we have on the new Isle of Wight. It's basically bringing over changes and fixing things, but not expanding the width of area we populated with assets. No.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. There's a few people that are asking around why SWR wouldn't approve a licensing game. I don't think it's that they haven't approved it. I think there's discussions are ongoing with them around it, and obviously it's their own prerogative to be able to speak to us. It's a kind of, I guess, Matt, you good opportunity to perhaps bring you in this. In terms of licenses, it's obviously quite a difficult subject. Some companies are a lot more precious over their IP or their intellectual property than others. I mean, we've spent ages, for instance, for Train Simulator being able to bring in the BNSF license, for instance, that had been within the rest of the world because we couldn't use it anywhere outside of the US.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a recent development. But as I say, are there any kind of other bits that you want to add to that?
No, I mean, licensing is incredibly complex. You have a whole team dedicated to working with licensing partners, and it's about understanding, what their concerns are or what they want to see out of the arrangement, and then making that happen. And sometimes that takes quite a long time. We've spent years in some cases pursuing licenses. Sometimes they're very quick, sometimes they're not. But it is their property. It is their prerogative to do with as they wish, and sometimes a train simulation is not the biggest thing on their list. They've got a railway to run, so we will work out. We'll do our best to work with them and get the best result that we can. But at the end of the day, it is their decision, and we must respect that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's worth reminding as well. Someone just mentioned this in the chat, but it is worth reminding that obviously we are engaging on a slightly more kind of corporate level than perhaps players will be able to. So if you are thinking about jumping on the socials and tagging them in and saying, why have you not done this, probably not going to help matters. So so just let us talk to them. Let's see where the discussions go, and if we have anything for you, we'll let you know. I wanted to just touch on, before we let you go, Jasper, we have got I've got kind of two more areas that I wanted to touch on, and that's other add-ons from Rivet. Whilst we've got you on the stream, it makes sense to talk about the other stuff that's going on in the background that I know you've been working
Absolutely.
on. Before Christmas, we released an update to Arosa, which fixed some of the physics and the timetables for the route itself, and made it, in my opinion, a lot more engaging, a lot more playable. And since then or not since then, but we've also released West Cornwall Local and Luzerne Circe over the course of the last 6-7 months or so. Do you have any updates for anything you'd like to do for those routes at all?
Yes. So that's the point where I look awkwardly to one side of the screen. That's because I have my list of things here and not forget. So we have two things. So we have an ongoing discussion on West Cornwall Local about issues flagged, but we have a few ones that I can confirm we've fixed, and these will come out at some point. So the first one is the delay when the train is starting off a station. So we've fixed that, so the engine now revs up much higher before it then moves off, as this was one of the most requested fixes by players. And then we have a slower and therefore more accurate acceleration between 0 and 30 miles per hour. And it's slower above that as well, because people mentioned it was more behaving like a new electrical train and not like one of the old diesel trains. And then the revs no longer drop if you select forward or reverse with the reverser. That's the updates we can promise on West Cornwall Local. We're looking into fixing some other things as well, but we'll get to that once we cross that bridge. And then we have a few updates on the S-Burns and trials, right? So Luzerne Circe, which are currently with Dovetails QA. And these are a major sound improvement on the RAB 523, especially in the lower parts, in the slower driving speeds. And we have two bonus scenarios, sort of as a goodwill, to make up for that issue with the SPB licensing, going back and forth on the livery editor, and minor improvements to the TCS system as well. So yeah, there's some work going on in the background.
Yeah, and as with and that's great to hear, by the way. I know that there's it's one of those things where obviously everybody would like it quicker. I think that's I mean, Dovetail are equally as guilty of this kind of thing as Rivet might have been in the past, but I think that there is a desire to make things and improve things as we go through based on player feedback, and hopefully this kind of thing will show that is happening. The feedback is being heard, and the things that are able to be improved without sort of impacting other things on the route are being implemented. And worth saying as well that as part of these will probably come under what we would define as, say, inverted commas, preservation crew updates. So they would be things that we would look to release with other kind of, I'm not going to say smaller updates, but those updates that are perhaps the ones that would coincide with the preservation crew update. So once they have been fixed and then they've been tested internally, then we will put them into a build. We don't have a time frame for those yet, but good news all the same.
Yeah, just worth keeping in mind that fixing something is not always just like actually doing the fix, but it needs to go into testing as well, and especially on fixes like the physics update to the class 150. These are quite complex because it then requires the timetable to be touched or updated, at least because people still want to be able to complete their runs so in time with the gold medal. A bit more complex.
Absolutely. And there will be a preview stream next Tuesday for the Island Line 2022 DBBR. Sorry, not DBBR. BR class. I always get those mixed up because they're in my brain.
It's confusing.
They don't work. 484. So at this point, Jasper, is there anything else you wanted to add in for players to be aware of at this stage, or is there anything you'd like to say before we do before we move on to the other bits and pieces?
Not really. Looking forward to the stream next week. Pre-orders are live. Go have a look for yourself. make sure you watch the walk around video to get a first impression of the train. And yeah, see you next week on the previous stream.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us, Jasper. We will move to a two-person screen in a second, so as part of one of these amazing new transitions that we have. So thanks very much, Jasper. We'll see you next week, and yeah, we'll see you around on the forums and on Discord as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, and see you next week.
See you later.
All right, bye-bye.
And then there were two. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
Just a quick related question based on the...
of course, he's left and it's rejigged all of your
nice
settings.
No. Okay, bear with me 1 second. We will move you back in. Oh, wait, no, we won't move that one back in. Bear with me. Uno momento. This is obviously completely ideal and exactly what we wanted. There we go. Oh, look at that. Let's have this one where Matt's on two screens. Okay. Let's give me 1 second, Matt. You fill for a second.
Giving JB a big hug.
Yeah, you fill for a second while I go and sort this out and talk about something fun that players are going to.
What's
enjoy.
everyone been playing in Train Sim World? What's been getting on? OMG, we have enough with one, Matt. Thanks, Fred Leader. Oh dear. Bakerloo line, very good, Charlie Chili. I've been playing a little bit of Bakerloo line myself.
Ooh.
Not a lot. Oh, hello. We've got chat window up here now. This is great.
There we go. Now, giant Matt. Now. Okay, bear with me 1 second. I'll tell you what I'm going to do then is I'm going to put you back onto the Be Right Back screen so that we don't have this ridiculousness. And then I will see if I can amend this live. This is obviously not ideal. So I'm going to have to do it on here, I think, actually. So bear with me.
Few of you playing Great Western, excellent. Enjoying the updates to that one. It's looking good. Adam's team have done a fantastic job on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the guys have done a stellar job all round, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, very pleased.
Oh, and then we've got some chat on there, so we need to get rid of that bad boy. There we go. And then we're back. Back in the game. After a small malfunction of the audio, the camera, Matt is back. There we go.
A few of you asking about Bakerloo Timetable. We'll get to it. We'll come to it as one of the topics for today.
Yeah. So let's talk about all of the things that we have mentioned in today's roadmap, because again, it's one of those ones where we've talked about quite a lot of things, and I'd like us to be able to have that time tonight to be able to talk about some of them. Now, I know that some people are quite excited because we're doing a Q&A later. So we've got a load of questions that we've sourced from the forums that we're going to go into a bit more detail on. But first of all, we're going to touch on some of the things that we have talked about over the course of this month's roadmap. There are some bits and pieces that it would be helpful, I think, to talk about in a little bit more detail. So let's start with Spirit of Steam, shall we? Because obviously that is now a month and a little bit since launch. There have been some improvements to the route, and last week we released a derailing improvement, which from what we can gather has largely been successful. There are a few kind of knock-ons which we'll come on to in a second, but that is hopefully a really nice quality of life improvement for everybody who's playing the route. Let's talk about that derailment bug to begin with, because obviously it was something that we became aware of quite quickly, and it's not a simple fix. And again, Matt, you can go into a little bit more detail on this. Tell us a little bit about the fix and the challenge that we've had with it.
So the derailment bug was down to the way couplers behaved, and now I can't go too much more than that, because I basically cling on with my fingernails sometimes when the engineers are trying to explain what's going on, and the blank expression crosses my face. But essentially, it's down to the way the couplings behaved, which is a core behavior inside the game. So it wasn't the way that an individual coupler was configured on the wagons or on the 8F. It was a core behavior of it. So we didn't want to make that change without having more time to test it, get it in the hands of the beta testers for a bit. So having got Spirit of Steam out, we then put the fix in their hands, and they confirmed it fixed it brilliantly, and that's now gone out. So in terms of knock-on effects, there's been one change that I'm not 100% sure if it's absolutely related, but the timing seems a bit suspicious, so we're going to call it related. And that's that, for example, if you play the auto runner scenario on main specibarn, it just derails instantly when it starts. And what's happening there, again, it's couplers again. And what's happening is that the layers wagons, uniquely for some strange reason, have a particular method that they're set up with, which means that what happens is when the train starts, it immediately does this, and all the couplings get suddenly massively pulled towards each other. On a small train, you just sort of feel the cab bounce around a bit, and you'll notice that in some of the other MSB stuff. But on a train full of layers wagons, it throws us straight off the track. So that's we have a fix for that in testing at the moment. So that'll be coming out as soon as possible. And so far, testing on that has gone well, but obviously what I'm trying to do now is encourage the testers and the beta testers to try a lot more and see if we can, not find the next knock-on effect that were there, so we can try and get it all done once. So we should be good. Now, there are going to be other things that derail on start, but they are caused by usually because of formation starting at the beginning. So, for example, there's one service on Diesel Legends of the Great Western, which is the 08 hauling some coaches out of Old Oak Common, and the minute it starts, it explodes, and it's because the coaches are placed too far over and they're overlapping some buffer stops. So that's a different problem, and we're going to try and get a fix to pull those forward. And there's some other related issues like that. So we're kind of getting on top of it. But these two fixes, the one that's out and the one we're just testing, are core fixes that affect everything. So those are really good to find and get out. So I'm really pleased about that. But it does mean that we need to test a little broader. But I think we're coming to the end of that now, and results are very good.
Thanks very much for that, Matt. Yeah, as I say, it's one of those ones which has a bit of a knock-on that we always find, unfortunately, and we've caught a lot of them before release happens. But there's always going to be, with the amount of content that we've got, there's going to be always a challenge with some of this stuff. So we are identifying what the other things are, and we're going to hopefully bring them through.
Actually, Hentis said the 72 stock is over the buffer stops. I believe Adam's actually already got a fix for that one in his fix list, so that's in hand.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. So let me touch on the next bits and pieces with regards to Spirit of Steam, because obviously there are a few things that have been mentioned by us, which are the lack of sound and exhaust effects on AI. Traffic, that was noticed quite quickly after release. I believe, Matt, you said that there is a fix in development.
Yes. So the engineering team got onto that one. I need to go and check in with them and find out if that one's actually gone in now. If all good, then I'll try and get an update on when we can get that one out. But yeah, it has been investigated and looked into. So I'm hopeful that shouldn't be too long.
The Blood and Custard coaches, they're not in. Well, they're in. Is it scenarios they're in? They're not in service mode as it stands. Believe
so.
That...
On Gen 8 consoles like Xbox One, PlayStation 4, that's intentional. Because of memory. They just don't have the memory, given the complexity of track and so forth. On Gen 9 consoles and PC, it's not intentional, so that's under investigation.
Okay, cool. The lack of custom liveries in rolling stock in timetable mode?
Similar. It's essentially a very similar problem. It's about substitution, which is what causes the Blood and Custard coaches to come in as well as custom liveries. So I imagine the fix for one will fix the other. Cool.
And the manual firing feature.
So work on the Steam system continued after release, continues while the engineering question taking a well-deserved nice long break, having been working very, very hard on Steam up until now. But he's made some really good progress, and I don't have any updates other than vagaries such as that, but work continues on that, and also other general refinements of the Steam system, such as the there's an issue whereby people can, if you drive your steam engine particularly well, you can get it up to about 600, or apparently 600 miles an hour or something silly like that. It's not actually going that fast. It's the wheels have decided to go crazy. But it's down to the steam physics and so forth. So it's there's a number of just broader improvements beyond just the way that the firing needs to be implemented. But actually, the engineers have made some good progress on that. But it's not made it into any builds. I suspect it'll be a little while yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So longer term improvements. So we'll move away from Spirit of Steam for a second, because again we want to go into Q&A, so we want to give as much time for that as possible. So we'll whistle through some of the other things that we've talked about. So one of the things that we really wanted to get to talk, well, we'll come into this a little bit later actually when we talk about QA, but we've released a couple of other larger updates over the course of the last couple of weeks, last few weeks, including the Great Western Express and the West Somerset Railway and the Northern Transpennine Preservation Crew updates, as well as also some of the other kind of more miscellaneous improvements to various different parts of the game, including the Xbox Jackhammer improvement, which was released last week. We've had some really positive responses to it, which is brilliant, and wanted to just quickly mention A, that it's a thing, and B, Matt, for you to kind of tell us a little bit about how that came to being, because I know that there was discussion in the last roadmap about that being a substantial download size for people, and that also being something that we were still investigating. So to get it out nice and early and to get it out as positively as we did feels like a really good win for us.
Yes. So a big shout out to Alberto and the other engineers who worked on this issue. Actually, it's been very difficult and very complex, and what they've been what Alberto in particular has been looking into is the causes of the issue, and what they can do to predict the issue is going to happen with that. So eventually we had the fix. We had a fix which involved recooking all the content using a new audio format or a variation of the audio format. This wasn't even, we talked previously about switching everything to something called the OGG audio format and moving away from the X audio format.
Yeah, absolutely.
But actually, by switching to a different encoding style on X audio, that seems to cure it as well. But that again was a full recook of absolutely everything, and there was no way you could do a bit of it at a time. It had to kind of, because it would all switch everything over. It would crash. It's kind of like all or nothing. So we were keen to not give up on, can we find some other option there before we go down that route, because that is particularly painful PlayStation 4. Although it doesn't, because the fix doesn't really, actually, no, it's not painful for PlayStation 4. They don't have to download it. It's an Xbox fix, isn't it? It's just a painful download, as well as being hugely time consuming to build, upload, and everything else. So the engineering team carried on looking into the issue, and they were able to find in the core code where it was going to go wrong. So they could actually detect in the code, if these things are set in these ways, by the time I get here, then it's about to start doing the hammer, the jackhammer.
Yeah.
And then they were able to put something in place to stop it from happening. So it doesn't prevent it from happening, but it stops it from being a problem, if you see what I mean. It's kind of like the proper fix would be this full regeneration of all the audio. The fix that's gone in there now, which isn't really any less proper, but what it does is it just means it detects, this might go wrong, and fixes it on the fly, essentially, which means that then it's just a small change to the code, which is very little download at all, and just very, very much a superior fix compared to the other way of doing it, which was just going to be a nightmare. Just all we could see is people having problems with their game would just crash and not load, and all sorts of problems like that. And so we were desperately trying to find something like this. I don't know if it was a try-catch block, Liam. I don't do coding on the game. Engineers do that.
Yeah.
magic happened, and you got a really sweet short download, which made the problem go away. So it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It makes such a big difference to the whole audio experience.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, again, we've seen some amazing feedback from players saying it's basically a new game for them now, which is brilliant. It's great to hear that kind of thing, and really a really positive kind of really good. I'm going to say a good news story because it's a challenge that has been a challenge for a long time, but it's a really good opportunity for us to kind of bring some of these longer term challenges and get them out to players as well. And that kind of also brings us nicely onto the Add-ons Manager, which we've talked a few times about over the course of the last few weeks, which is the was otherwise known as the PS5 add-ons issue, and we're coming to the point now where, as I say, we have a fix in the works. We have the DLC manager in kind of how we've created it at the moment. We're just going through testing at the moment, so it's gone. Matt, again, you're going to be closer to this than I am. What's the kind of current status of that?
DLC Manager is doing really well. There is a QA engineer in at the moment doing testing because the builds are getting there. We're not quite at a point where we can actually deploy this out to, for example, the Xbox Beta team yet, but nearly. So we're just working through some stability issues, this is common. This is kind of expected at this point, having ripped out the foundations of how the game loads content, which happens throughout the game's code essentially, and redone it in using the DLC manager. It's it's an enormous change actually. Again, another big credit to engineers that have worked on it. So at a point where we're approaching stability now on that, which is a major milestone. And so the sort of like the next major milestone for that would be to get that over to the Xbox Beta team, and get some feedback from there. Because even though they don't suffer from the DLC limitations that are on the other on the PlayStation, which is the reason we started going down this path. What it will mean, for example, is crashes that are occurring on Series S, for example, should be massively reduced, if not entirely eliminated, because so much less is loaded into memory now.
Yeah.
But compared to what was before, so it's going to be exciting to just prove that element of things on the Xbox platform, and I guess once that'll be probably the next time to really talk in more substance about next steps, and how we're making steps towards getting out to players.
Yeah, and then
it's good. It's good.
Yeah, and then that will enable or unlock, because there was a question we were going to talk about later about rush hour passengers on things like London commuter, and that kind of is the first step for us to be able to then enable that kind of thing on one of those sorts of routes where we have seen some performance issues with particularly 8th gen consoles. So
Yes.
That's the first step. And when
once we've proved that we got memory sort of back in control, then we can start thinking about things which start consuming memory again, like adding passengers and so forth to the routes. Blackpool Matt says, do you expect improvements on Gen 9 and PC? I'm not sure whether PC would really benefit from it that much, although I believe it is deployed as part of the PC build, because generally PCs have got oodles of memory. It's like the Series X, for example, has got 16 gig of memory, and it's really rare that you find something like an Xbox Series X running out of memory. You might find some improvements on Gen 9 and PC, but the things it's fixing aren't really a problem on those platforms. So it's more going to benefit Gen 8, PS5, those sorts of areas.
Yeah, and again, those are the areas that we've seen the most amount of challenges, particularly since the release of the rush hour content. So I think if it improves that, then we're in a much better place as well. So we're all in a good spot. So final one I'm going to touch on before we go into the Q&A is red lights / save game, because whilst they're not the same issue and they are very, very different issues with very, very different complex things associated with it, I'm going to group them together because the way that we're going to talk about them is very much in a similar approach. So we know that there are issues, and we know that there are issues across multiple routes and multiple points across the game. However, and you might hear us talk about this a little bit more like in the coming weeks and as we get closer to it, what we have is we've got kind of our engineering team and we've got our content team. The engineering team will be looking at these kind of large scale improvements, which are incredibly complex, likely to touch all parts of the game, and are going to be a significant, hopefully, improvement to everybody playing the game. But we need that work to happen from the the engineering team before we can do a lot of the content related stuff, because we could sort of try and chip away at things one by one on different routes, but that's not really an effective use of our time, particularly on routes things like London Commuter, where there are so many services available to players. It makes much more sense for us to try and tackle this at source. If we can improve things like the dispatcher, if we can improve the save game functionality, and if you missed us talking a little bit more detail about it in the last roadmap stream, we kind of detailed some of the challenges with the save game, and how we would look to try and implement it and change it. That is definitely going to be the same thing that we're looking to do for things like the dispatcher challenge as well. And we're still in the investigative process part of this at the moment, where we still don't quite know the scale of the improvement needed in order to make these things less of an issue, but there is work going on behind the scenes to investigate these things. Matt, I know I've talked for a little while there. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, this situation hasn't really changed from when we spoke about it the last time. It's about fully understanding the problems, and we're making good progress on that, and then identifying where the right place to get these fixes in is going to be. Sometimes it is just actually if you put a dependency on or change the routing of a train, you can avoid the problem altogether. And other times there's just no way you can avoid it. It's a core dispatcher issue. So it's finding where the right things are, particularly for dispatch problems, to red light issues, or that you've got for save game issues. Again, it's sometimes so for every control that you want to move on, like a throttle lever or something on a locomotive, anything like that has a tick box that says to include it in the save game. And if any of those are missed off, your save game stops working properly. So it's it's things like that. Sometimes it can be as simple as that. Other times it can be as simple as, again, the dispatcher restoring correctly. So, and those would be central fixes. It's really interesting. There's lots going on. I don't really have much any particular progress to report on that at the moment, though. But we're getting a good handle on it, I think.
Okay, all right. We'll touch. So those are kind of the big name things that we're currently working on, and that's obviously really important for us to keep working on those. So we'll keep you updated on the progress, as well as all of the. We haven't got Adam on tonight because there wasn't sort of a significant preservation crew update that we wanted to give to you guys, but obviously we will continue to provide that information when things get closer to release, or we've got more information for you as well. But we'll move on to the Q&A now, because I know that a lot of players were really excited about Q&A. We've got some pre-selected questions from the forums. We'll try and take a couple of live ones, but we have got quite a lot of people that have submitted to the forum thread, so we're going to prioritize those tonight. A quick preface to this as well. There are a lot of questions on the forum about when is this coming, when is that coming, when are the things that where are things that we haven't really ever mentioned before, or things that are not currently on the roadmap, whereabouts are they? We're not going to be giving you updates on those tonight. I mean, get your bingo cards out now, or your bingo dabbers out now, because if there are things that we haven't mentioned that you're wanting to know a little bit more information about, the likelihood is that they're not being worked on at the moment. We're prioritizing other stuff. So if it's not currently in the roadmap, then it's not something that we're actively working on. So we can touch on, so that is the answer to a broad breadth of the questions that we received today, but we're going to focus on some of the other ones that were slightly broader. slightly talking more about the kind of the core facets of the game and kind of more of our, I suppose, allow more discussion. So we're going to start tonight by talking about night lighting, because we know that was a big thing that players were discussing on the forums, or have been discussing on the forums, about the quality of the night lighting, the variability of the night lighting across different routes, and us being able to establish some kind of standard for night lighting further forward. Now, we've talked in the past, Matt, about having some kind of standardized list of features or standard list of quality bar or something like that, where internally we have to tick all of these boxes before we want it to go to players. Now, has there been any progress on that at all?
So the team is kind of looking into the nuts and bolts of lightning. This is kind of, this is a broader theme, actually. The same as some of the red light issues, save game issues. It's just like the issue is not out on the surface of all of the individual. This light bulb is wrong and that light bulb is wrong. Actually, it's quite possible that there are broader issues with the lighting, which are why it's very difficult to make to balance headlights day and night, for example, so that you get lights that are American headlights should shine for a long distance in the night and barely be visible during the day, and you can't really do that at the moment, and you get similar problems with other things where if you make it look good at night, it looks terrible during the day. That sort of points to there being a broader issue. So the team are focusing on the broader issue to see about that, and then we can take a look at other aspects as we get to it. So it's this is something that's you're not going to see a quick result from this bit of investigation, but lighting is certainly something that the team are investigating bigger solutions for.
Okay, so we'll put that into the bracket with save game, dispatcher. They're kind of the longer term things that we are aware of and the team are investigating, and when we have more players, we'll let them know.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of that standard features list, I'm gonna drill back into that, Matt, because it is something that we talked about 2 or 3 months ago. Is that something that we now have, or is that something that we're looking to do moving forward?
We're getting there. There is a standard list, and it's starting to get rolled into practice, but it's because of obviously the process, the iteration time for new projects. You need to run this sort of list multiple times to make sure it captures everything. So it's getting there. It's definitely getting there.
Okay.
It's already helping.
You know me. I am going to keep nagging.
Please do.
We will. The thing is, though, I think it's one of those things where it's very difficult for us to put something like that public. Now, we can have an internal list, and I think that is the appropriate way to do this. I think having a public list is probably not the most sensible way of us going about this. So we'll update you when we have got a list, but we're probably not going to give you the information and the ins and outs of what that list contains, at least in the shorter term. Okay, let's talk a little bit about audio now. So this is specifically a few bits and pieces that have kind of become legacy challenges over a long period of time as we've moved from core game to core game. So as we moved to from TSW 2020 to TSW2, and then with the core update that came with Rush Hour last year, there are a few audio things that have been broken or they don't work as they perhaps did do beforehand. The thread that I grabbed or that I looked at specifically was talking about quite a lot of German stock, for instance. So things like rolling sounds disappearing from inside the cabs, sound from passing freight trains fade out, the CIFA, PZB, AWS buzzer seem to have a cut in them now. Are these things that we're aware of? And in terms of the general kind of priority listing of things, how are we looking to deal with these sort of longer term, perhaps I'm going to bracket them as audio challenges, because I think that they are probably something the audio team would look at.
So I don't think these come under the classification of being like one thing that's broke a bunch of stuff. I think there's just a bunch of stuff that's got broken. And I know that the Pres crew, with the assistance of the audio team, have been looking at some stuff. So I'd see this as falling into Pres crew's remit to go through these affected locos, and try and get them back to their former glory or better, which is something Press Crew is really good at, actually. So it's something that'll be on Press Crew's list to look into. Definitely aware of it though. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so the extended downtime that we've talked about for like the last 3 months or so, which has kind of been in effect really for the last 3 months or so since I think we had I'm not going to call it state of play live stream in April, but we did have a quite a lengthy chat around QA and sorry, not QA, about the extended downtime and what it is that we wanted to achieve from doing that. I thought it'd be helpful at this stage because there were a few questions around that sort of thing. What is it that we wanted to achieve during this extended downtime period, and how far have we progressed with some of those things that we wanted to achieve?
So it's been about giving the team some space to really, particularly the QA teams, deployment teams, build teams. There's a lot more people involved in making content than just the person that places the house or makes the train. It's where Press Crew, take one particular example, have done a bunch of updates, and we've got a little bit of a backlog now. What you've seen in the recent since Spirit of Steam is we've been managing to get some of that stuff out. I think one of the first releases that we did was not without its troubles, and so we've also taken the time to sort of review and revise and try and improve it, get more interactive with the both beta groups, PC and Xbox beta groups, and make sure that their feedback is being measured correctly and put into action. So to where the last update, the GW one, I believe went out by and large without a hitch. So that's really, really pleasing to see the process improvements are working in that front. So it's been about that. It's been about it's all of these other people and freeing them up from the release schedule so that they can get these builds made, get them uploaded, get through certification on the various platforms, and then get it down through QA and into people's hands. So there's an enormous amount of work that goes on there, and so this downtime effectively has allowed that to happen. So we started to see an acceleration in these Press Crew updates coming out. We've also been able to get things like the Xbox Jackhammer fixed on through QA and out as well, a lot faster than we would have done previously, I have to say. So because it was quite a big core change to the game. I say big, it's not necessarily lines of code, but an impactfully big in terms of you're touching the audio engine. You don't do that without checking what you're doing. So it's very good to see those things out, and it's those things. These are some of the big successes. But some of the Press Crew releases and so forth, getting those out have been some of the big successes lately. But no, I'm very pleased with that. And obviously, there's always want to see more out. But one of the things that we kind of realised was we need to slow down a little bit because we were getting a bit ahead of ourselves, which is why the quality wasn't very good enough in the beginning, first couple of releases. But I think we're finding a balance now. Which is good. I don't know, Adam's team were thrilled to see that last update out, and they've really enjoyed seeing your feedback and all of the feedback you've been given about that. So really, really pleased for Adam, and I'm glad everyone's enjoying it.
As am I. So what changed then? What I know we said we've obviously there's a time factor here, but is there anything else that's changed behind the scenes that with the way that we do our updates? Because there's something I was going to come on to later, which was sort of QA, quality assurance, whatnot, but we might as well touch on it now. So what's changed since then? Because as I say, from my personal perspective, the last couple of updates I think could have been really challenging, but actually have been really, really positive, and the amount of impact that it's had, negative impacts, has been minimal. So what have we done that's different?
So there's changes in a few different areas. So in particular, as I touched on, we realised that there were gaps in the communications with the beta team. Nothing bad on them, bad on us. in terms of feedback that they were providing wasn't getting captured and actioned correctly. So we put extra effort into making sure that doesn't happen. That's just inexcusable. If we volunteers are giving us the feedback and somehow that's falling through the cracks, then we need to make sure that gets looked into and fixed, which is what we've done. So with both PC and Xbox beta teams, we got a lot of really good feedback and worked with them on testing fixes. At one point we were putting a fix up and then they were uploading it to Xbox. Then 2 or 3 Xbox testers were testing particular issues, and then we were doing a different fix somewhere else and just a nice cadence of testing, and just the level of interaction was superb, as it has been frequently on the PC. So again, a big shout out to the all the beta team, whether you're Xbox or PC. That has been fantastic and is definitely moving in the right direction, that's excellent. In other areas, the QA team have seen some big changes actually lately with senior leadership changing. We've got some really great direction coming in there now for how the team works and how they're and what they're doing and how they check what they're doing. The internal, some of the internal QA staff have actually been reorganized to where they work directly with the dev team. So instead of what we call an embedded QA, so this is someone who works day to day with the dev team to provide QA feedback on specific things rather than it having to be delivered as a thing into QA. So we can turn around these tests much more rapidly, and then when it finally goes into QA, they're also then much more informed about it because they've been part of that process, and they can expedite through that faster and more effectively as well. So that's worked very well. So, and then there's also we do make use of external QA to help us as well, and part of the changes, the senior leadership of the QA team is impacting how we work with the external, how we manage them, the team leads that we now have within the internal teams who are looking after those externals as well, and making sure that they know what they're doing, they're using right versions, and they're giving us feedback that's valuable as well. So there's been a lot of change, and this is only relatively recent. So we're keeping an eye on it very closely, but I'm hopeful this is a move in the right direction.
A big shout out to all of the beta testers, by the way, because I think they've done a sterling job in the last few weeks. Particularly, I know that we don't necessarily shout them out too often, and they don't necessarily. I mean, some of them might do, but a lot of them don't do the work because they want to be shouted out or put on a pedestal for it. But they do a fantastic job.
They do indeed.
So.
Yeah, they do indeed, and they're always there on hand to answer quick questions and so forth as well. It's a pleasure, it really is. And I'm also going to do a shout out to the QA team because they've been actually working really well with the changes and have adopted to them really well. And I'm seeing generally an uplift in those sort of the positivity and sort of hype for what they're testing. So it's which can only be a good thing. So it's awesome.
Agreed. Okay, so let's talk UI and interface because that's something that I know that a few people have mentioned in the Thelonious is the person that I've noted down, but there are a few other questions on UI and so user interface and how sort of navigable the game is. So in terms of the interface at the moment and the way that players interact with particularly like menu screens and things like that, are we happy with how that currently acts at the moment?
Not really, no. There's a number of elements of bit of feedback we've had from players, and certainly we've seen ourselves. It's as is common, the more you use the user interface, the more you become aware of the things that you wish were easier, or the things that you can't do, and you wish, surely that shouldn't be too hard to do. Why can't we do that? So this is and there's something that is, again, it's being looked at, and it's actually a big focus for Sam from a usability perspective, is figuring out the right way to do what we want to do within Train Sim World. So there is stuff happening. Again, don't expect anything short term on that, but we are very much aware of the points that were raised and share them, to be honest. So we'll see what we can do.
Okay. And just kind of there was a kind of a secondary part to that question, which was which I quite like the idea of, but I imagine it's going to open up a whole new can of worms that perhaps we don't want to go into tonight. But someone suggested like simple controls. So if you're playing with your younger your child or something like that, and they don't quite understand how to be able to get all of some of the more complex setup and whatnot, and operational bits and pieces. Would it be something that we would consider doing? Is it something that we've ever put any like plans into researching or anything like that?
So it actually applies to more than just children, even because sometimes older players just don't want to get bogged down in the detail of driving a train, and they just want to enjoy the visuals and the sounds and making the train move, not the detail of how you do it. So it kind of is useful for everybody that is interested in it. So it's something that has been discussed. We've got some ideas. Part of the challenge is that you'd still want to have full physics enabled so that you felt the train jostling around, the sounds all work, all the gauges work correctly, and so forth. But if you're not driving it realistically, there's a mismatch there that we need to mar. And we've got ideas for how that could potentially work as well. So it is, and I just want to clarify that this is completely separate from what you're doing at the moment. So if we would do this, the underlying rule is that it's a separate thing that you do when you want to, and it doesn't change the game if you don't want to do it. Because I think I already see a couple of people saying, no, please don't touch it. It
would be an
separate.
Additional thing, yeah. It wouldn't
It's
be
another
like
mode.
It wouldn't be like a simplified, like we're forcing everyone to do this. It would be like an optional setting or something like that.
This is about making the game more accessible, not changing the game, so that a wider range of people can enjoy it, and particularly when it comes to accessibility, and because it's, if you've got motor controls or something, then the level of detail you need to be able to drive a train accurately it may well be out of your reach, whereas faster, slower buttons are something you can probably more readily cope with. So it's there's lots and lots of good reasons for doing something like this. There are some challenges. We look like they're solvable, but it's nothing that we have got any plans to deliver at any time soon. Just being completely upfront about that.
Yeah. No, it's just an idea. I think it's been suggested, and I thought it seemed like a really good option for something that we might want to think about in the future. But yeah, definitely no current plans with which to do it from what I'm gathering there. Okay, let's talk. Let's talk about add-ons, because I think I did see a surprising amount of questions about Loco add-ons. Obviously, we've released a lot of route-based content in the last 12 months or so, and I think a few players are feeling like, are we not doing Loco add-ons anymore? Is it something that we're deprioritizing? Is it something that they're ever going to see the Loco they've been wanting for a long time ever kind of come to fruition? What's our stance on that?
So we certainly don't deprioritize Loco DLCs. We definitely want to do more Loco DLCs, but there's a lot of work goes into a locomotive. Particularly on Train Sim World. So the focus has been on getting them the best we can in the route DLCs. But we still want to go back to doing Loco DLCs. So watch this space on that one. And hopefully you'll see something there at some point. But no, we don't dislike Loco DLCs. It's more been a focus at the moment for us.
Okay. Yeah, so there's been no, I guess, conscious decision, but I think the thought was that we pay more attention to the locos that are within the respective sort of route offerings, I guess, rather than sort of a bespoke add-on that you might get for a slightly reduced price, but obviously it doesn't kind of really come with anything else.
There is also the issue that at the moment Loco DLCs are intrinsically tied to the route that they originally made for. So you can only really buy that. You can only buy and use the Class 33 if you're on West Somerset, even if you never want to use it on West Somerset. So that's another thing on our list of things that we want to improve as well.
That's interesting. Okay. I will allow you to ruminate on that one, Matt, and I'll probably come back to that next. I'll probably come back to that when I've had a chance to think of a proper question for it.
We mentioned it in the past. It's
Okay.
not new, but it's it's something that certainly I've seen a lot of people complain about it on the forums, particularly once we had Scenario Planner, to where you can now run any loco anywhere, but you still have to buy that route. So.
Okay. All right. Let's put those to one side for a second. We've got quite a lot more questions to ask. These ones are going to be focused mainly around some of our third-party developers. Now, we've obviously spoken to Jasper earlier on. We asked Adam to put together some responses to some of the questions that you've been suggesting for the third-party developers that we work with, and this content is either on the roadmap or not on the roadmap. So Just Trains obviously announced earlier this year that they're going to be working with us on Train Sim World 2. There's currently not a Just Trains piece of content on the roadmap. And there's a reason for that. It's because, and I think I think a lot of people who have been following Rivet, Skyhook has been following in that actually it takes a long time to adapt, particularly if you're used to working on Train Simulator to then moving on to Train Sim World 2. And that kind of getting over that initial hurdle and that road bump is challenging, working with new tools, working with a new game engine, and they're just taking their time. They're sort of doing their thing. They're working on bits and pieces, but there's not anything that's been progressed enough for us to be able to put anything onto a roadmap just yet. So that's Just Trains. There were a few questions about the 420 and the 232 as well. Same story as that, really, in that obviously we've worked with Mike, who is the developer for the loco, those respective locos for a long time. He's well respected within the community, and he does some really, really good content. He is in high demand though, and we're using him for when we're looking at sort of other pieces of content. We are kind of asking him his thoughts on them, and we're utilizing his expertise on things like and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, we used him for things like Tarandarampa, didn't we? We used his expertise for Tarandarampa.
Oh, I'm sure we did. I can't remember exactly what projects he's worked on now, but it's actually been quite a lot of projects.
Yeah.
I think the ICE3 was one of Mike's as well.
Yeah, so we've used him for some in-house stuff, which might mean that sometimes some of the stuff that he's working on separately is a little bit sort of slower than perhaps some players might obviously like it to be. And maybe longer term, I think what we're looking to do is actually only put things onto the roadmap from third-party developers when we're happy that they're in a position where we can talk a little bit more about them. I think, as I say, on the 420, we thought we were under the impression it was going to be released sooner than it actually currently is or has been. But it's still being worked on. So it's not a lie that it's on there. It's just that it's taken longer for us to put it on there. I think in retrospect we probably wouldn't have put it on there when we did.
There's also, when we make a train, we have multiple people working on it. When Mike makes a train, it's Mike working on the train. So they necessarily take longer. And Mike is also, he has a really high quality bar that he sets for himself. And so that means that time escalates even longer. So it'll be great, I'm sure. You just have to wait for it. It'll be worth the wait, I'm convinced.
Yeah, and the 232 will follow after that. So it's sort of further back in the pecking order than the 420.
It's a queue, literally a queue. So.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the DBBR 187, because I know that, again, there are a lot of people that are eagerly anticipating information on that. Adam, so Skyhook have completed a round of improvements for the 187, which are being tested and reviewed by our testing teams. He's said tentatively that we expect these improvements to happen later. I'm not going to say later. I'm going to say later.
Just put a full stop right there.
Just put a full stop right there. So he's expecting things to. We have got fixing for them, and I believe that covers the safety systems. I need to double check if it's the any audio improvements as well. But there is
I've seen some really positive feedback from the beta group that have got it as well. So I'm they've been singing its praises. So it's definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah. So it is with the beta group, which is obviously a positive sign because it means that we've got something that we're happy for them to test and to give us feedback on. Is it close to release at this stage? We can't say because it depends very much on their feedback.
Let us get it to where when it's nearly out, we can let you know, because otherwise than that we can tell you when it might come out and then be wrong. And we know you really hate that. So it's what we wanted to just say was, stuff is happening and being fed back positively with the beta group, and so as it goes through QA and gets closer to release, we can tell you more about it.
Yep, and in terms of the, we talked about again, you addressed this at the start of the stream, Matt, about the Bakerloo timetable improvements. There was a question from A. Rusco about the progress on the dynamic dispatcher. Now, I just want to, and Matt, you can probably wax lyrical about this. They're two slightly different things. And Matt, over to you, Matt, with the detail.
Right, so the Bakerloo timetable that Joe has built doesn't need what we talked about. It's being called dynamic dispatcher in a lot of places, and that's not really what that is. So I identified 4 changes that I felt needed to be done to making the Bakerloo timetable make sense in a sort of a sensible time frame, and 3 of those were done. And the 4th one, which is this area where it could choose a different path, it would choose out of 2 platforms to choose a different platform to go into, or a different siding to go into. So this affects Queen's Park and Elephant and Castle. What Joe found was he was super keen to have a go at making it, was that the changes that have been made are actually enough. So there are no plans at this point to do the extra step on the dynamic dispatcher, because we still hadn't figured out how to make that work, to be honest. It was riddled with questions about how to make that work in a testable way, in a repeatable way. There's all sorts of challenges there. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen at some point in the future, but it was a point of, we're not sure about this, and for Joe figuring out, actually building this timetable, which he built directly with the real timetable, he was able to not need that bit and use the benefit of the stuff that had already been done, and so that's not being held up by that core change. The new Bakerloo timetable, which is I believe going through QA. I don't know whether you had an update from Adam on that.
No, I haven't had an update.
Okay.
On that one.
So it's either going through QA or about to go through QA. We have it built. Beta testers have access to it, for example, but that is not being held up by the dispatcher changes. What's there now is enough to support this timetable. So it's really good, really impressive work that Joe has done there, as always.
Yep. Cool. Okay. So. Question from FD1003. They did ask also about the dispatcher and the robust, a more robust timetable. I think that kind of falls into the work that we're talking about with the dispatcher earlier on, but they've asked about a definite switch to real timings. I assume on timetables. I was under the impression, Matt, that we try to, where possible, go for the real timetables. Am I wrong in thinking that?
We do try and go with the real timetables. When I was making timetables, I would generally have it where it was the start service was done with the real time, and then the intermediate stops I just let the computer figure it out, because I did one timetable a long time ago, which was unfortunately never released for various reasons, where I individually typed in every time for every stop on thousands of instructions, which took about 2 months, and it failed for other reasons. So it was kind of a really unhappy time, let's just call it that. Whereas Joe has actually found a really clever mechanic or way of doing it, where it's kind of like it's as close as you can get to the real timetable, without having to type thousands of times in. It's very clever. It works really well, and it eliminates the relying on the AI timing, which is good as well. So because of some of the features that are in the timetable designer. So Joe always works to the base timetables, to the real timetables, and the rest of the team moving in that direction as well. When we did the Liverpool crew timetable, in fact, the timetable was developed about 60-70% complete and then thrown away and started again because the designer in question got hold of a better timetable, the more realistic timetable for the 1958 to match the route, rather than the best we could get at the time, which was post 1960s. So it's it's there is definitely, the whole team aspire towards using the real timetable wherever they can.
Yeah, and there's a little section in that in the roadmap actually, that Michael has put in there. When we do the development deep dive, where we talk about timetables, and there's a nice little screenshot as well for people to take a look at, to kind of see the kind of work that goes on behind the scenes with that sort of thing, because it is very very detailed and very spreadsheet heavy, so completely out of my comfort zone, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's an interesting process, very interesting process, and it's good to see the team working on it.
Yeah, cool. Seymour Goals has asked around the unobtainable trophies currently on, I think it's on Xbox and PlayStation, around the DBBR 143 on Riesa Dresden, and I believe there's also one on the DBBR 187 too. I know they've been causing a few problems for players who are obviously achievement hunters. What is it? I hope we're aware of this because I flag it quite regularly. What are we doing, Matt, about that particular issue?
It's under investigation at the moment. I call these things annoying technicalities. They're issues that shouldn't be issues, and so it's with the teams as well to figure out why that's wrong and get it fixed. But sometimes fixing achievements can be more of a pain than it should be, just because of how we work with the various platforms.
Okay.
It'll be checked. We're going to check it. Yana, when the trophy will be checked across all platforms.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sorry,
We don't just limit it. Whenever we revise an achievement or a trophy, we try to review it across all platforms, because you're kind of in that one same place anyway.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, I mentioned Xbox and PlayStation, but it's on PC as well. So yeah, I think it's across the board. Then we're going to go into some, what I'm going to call, miscellaneous questions for the last sort of 10 minutes or so, before we finish up for tonight. So Chief Longshin asks, has Spirit of Steam met Dovetail predictions? Or I'm not going to change predictions, I'm going to say expectations.
Well, it's the most played released to date ever. And I'm seeing lots of people having a great time. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's exceeded my expectations. I think it's exceeded the company's expectations, and everybody is super excited to see Steam now. It's there's an enormous amount of work, getting it to this point, and I think the player feedback has been brilliant to see, and it's been I would say a very successful release.
Good to hear it. And I think that the challenge that we're going to have is being able to follow it up and make sure to say that when we're looking at future content that involves steam locomotives, that they are that we're paying the same kind of level of attention and love to them as Liverpool Lime Street's crew was.
Sorry, so Whitworth Lime talking about the wheel blur on the Gen 9 Xbox. I don't have an update for you on that one. It's still with the engineering team. I think the last time I spoke to them, they had a handle on what the problem was, but I've not had an update yet on a fix.
Okay, cool. Stu Joy asks, I'd like to know why I can't see all of my train behind me on Sherman Hill on PS5. Distant wagons is obviously great. One of the great selling points of the route is being able to see that mass train of rolling stock and everything that's kind of in the backdrop, and all the lovely Railfan shots. Obviously that's a challenge for a route like that. Is there anything is it something we're aware of? Is it something that we're looking at?
Oh, very much aware of it. But it's not just as simple as a handful of pixels on the screen, because it being there means there's a lot more calculations that get done on it, which then get ramped up for lesser and lesser pixels. But it's possibly too short at the moment. It's not something being actively looked into at the moment, but it's definitely on our we want that to look better list.
Okay, cool. British ASOS, any estimate for when the Harlem M7A sounds will be put into the Long Island Railroad M7? And I've got an answer from Adam here. It's in the queue for things assigned to the team, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. It is high on the to-do list though, and the sort of the opportune moment would be, I would imagine, with the Long Island Railroad Preservation Crew update, which we don't have a time frame for as of yet, and I'm not promising that it's going to be part of that, but it would seem like a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Pinguini's asked, why was there no survey or poll in spring this year? Now, interesting question, because we have done quite a few surveys and polls in the last 24 months or so, from what I can gather. So Sam would normally look after the surveys and send them out to players. We have had other things that we've been looking at for the time being, and obviously a lot of people know Sam's personal circumstances as well. So we are looking at perhaps doing one toward the end of this year. It seems more sensible to do sort of an end of year kind of review. So we're going to look at seeing what we can do for the end of this year. When we've answered that one already. My final question tonight, actually, Matt, for you, because I think we've asked some of the other ones already, which were around the rush hour passengers for Brighton, and for the Jackhammer Xbox fix, what allowed it to be fixed a little bit earlier or a little bit more cumberlessly than otherwise. Cumberlessly? That's
Making
not,
words up
definitely
as
not a
required.
word. You can be cumbersome, but you can't be cumberless, I guess. But anyway. Final question actually is a bit of a out there one, something that I don't think we've discussed. Well, I've certainly not discussed on streams before, and virtual reality compatibility with TSW2. It feels like a nice one to finish on, and apparently it was mentioned by you a while back, Matt. So maybe
There's
I am
been
wrong. By
discussions
Alan
about
Butler.
it on the forums. It comes up occasionally in Q&As. It's usually Sam makes a point to leave it in every survey so that everyone can see it's still at the bottom of the list of the features that people want in the game. It's always on the mind. It's on my mind particularly because I find it hard to play a game that's not in VR these days. I'm a massive VR fan. It's always on our minds. It's an aspiration to get the game into VR. It's not on any plans, and it's not on anything else. I've done all sorts of designs for how I want it to be, but this is just me waxing lyrical because I love me some VR.
I'm putting my hand down on this one conversation right away. Again, getting the bingo dabbers out. Not on the roadmap. Not currently being worked on. Very much an aspiration. Don't expect it anytime soon.
No. All of those things. It's it's a wish and an aspiration, but it's not a thing that's being looked into.
Cool. Okay. So Matt, is there anything else you wanted to touch on tonight before I let you go for the evening? I know that we've tried to cover quite a lot of ground with those questions, and we want to have this opportunity to do some Q&A during or pre-prepare, like pre-get your questions for things like these live streams, so we can source the answers better than we perhaps can do live, and get you the most informed decisions that we can do, rather than, oh, we're going to have to go and check that, or I'm not quite sure at this stage. So it allows us that little bit of extra time. We are going to keep doing this for the roadmap live streams moving forward. But is there anything else you want to touch on tonight, Matt?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Awesome. Okay, well, I will let everybody go there for this evening. Hope you have enjoyed this live stream, enjoyed this roadmap. We've hopefully covered quite a lot of ground there, and I know there are a few questions that a lot of players were wanting a little bit of discussion on, so hopefully we've given you a little bit of discussion on those. The roadmap is available to read on our website. Obviously, you can watch this VOD as well afterwards if you choose, and we will very much be with you with another roadmap next month. Steam Summer Sale is also live, but it's only live for about another 20 hours or so. So make sure if you've got anything on your wish list, you will go and grab it. And other than that, have a lovely evening. See you later, Matt. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Judy.
See you later. Have a nice evening, everybody.